I think our guest this evening would fit the bill. Everyone knows Ryan Holmes, co-founder, CEO of Hootsuite. He built the company, started in 2008, built it to 1,000 employees, I think 18 million customers, 800 of the Fortune 500. But like I said, he needs no introduction, and I think tonight we're really in for a treat. Thanks, Ryan, for giving us your Monday evening. We're looking forward to the talk.
First of all, I have to thank you for coming. I think when we started Tech Vancouver, we put a list of 5 to 10 people we wanted to speak or talk to, and you were on that list. So it took us about 3 years to get you out here. So thank you for coming tonight.
We did it. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to go way back. You were born and raised in Vernon, BC. From what I read, your home didn't have electricity. So tell us how you got into entrepreneurship. Tell us what your first was and what inspired you to be an entrepreneur and what you did.
Yeah, well, you heard right. So yeah, I grew up off of the grid, which is a fancy way of saying without any electricity. So my parents were teachers in the 70s. They left teaching and they bought a hobby farm. So I grew up with goats and chickens and honeybees and kerosene lamps. And it was a really fun, little house on the prairies type of childhood. And I think, you ultimately grow up to be a disappointment to your parents at some point. And so I at an early stage, I think, we are, about a half hour outside of Vernon, BC, which is already a small city, kind of up in the mountains. And at an early age, I think I started a lemonade stand. Talk about a terrible product market fit. Like 0 customers sitting there at the end of the driveway, and like, all right, how does this thing work? But my mom was an entrepreneur. I think a lot of people that end up being entrepreneurs have entrepreneur parents. It helps kind of demystify this thing of entrepreneurship that we do. She got me going actually with my first paying entrepreneurial job, which was window washing. She had a store, and she gave me a squeegee and asked me to clean the windows of her store, and she gave me, I think a $1 or something like that, which was big money back then. And then said, I bet the neighbor wants their windows washed, and so I went over there with the squeegee and I did their window, and that was kind of my first thing. I got a taste for it. I went on from there. I did a paintball field, which was my first, actual business. I guess I can't think about it that way. And that was an incredible business I did through high school. And it was another one of the benefits of living kind of out in the middle of nowhere and off of the normal track. I was able to start a paintball field and not have the neighbors complain about it. So
I get paintball. I get cleaning windows. Where did technology and electricity come into play? So, what was your first experience, and how do you know technology is what you wanted to do?
Well, back to that thing that, disappoints your parents. So I got, at a really early age, because kerosene lamps, it's kind of just boring, quiet life. My mom remembered the first time I went to the city, Vancouver with her, and I just sat in a room at my aunt's and just switched the lights on and off. And this was like a mind blower for me. Like, you can just do this. Why don't we do this, Mom? This is really good. Because kerosene lamps stink. But I had this attraction to technology at an early stage. In the school, my elementary school library, there was a computer lab, which was kind of ahead of its time in the 80s. They had about 4 Apple computers, and they were on first come, first serve. And so every recess lunch after school, I'd run there to play on the educational games, which were kind of terrible. But I just got so into it. And the school librarian, said, "Hey, Ryan, there's this thing called programming, and with it, you can make your own games." And I was like, "Oh, you can do that? You can make your own? This is incredible." And he said, "You want to learn how to do a bit of it?" And so he taught me some Hello World and some real basic stuff. And I just got so into it. So always hanging out. Shortly thereafter, there was a school district-wide computer programming contest, and the librarian asked if I wanted to enter it. I said, "Oh, absolutely." Grand prize was an Apple IIc computer, which is a really cool computer back in the day, and the big day comes and I actually won the computer. And so that was, so I had this computer, so excited, but I had a problem. You guys know the thing. So I took it home. I was sleeping with it. My dad was like, we have to do something about this problem that we've got with this computer and no electricity. So he took it to an electronics shop, got it rewired. And so every day I'd come home after school, I'd pop the hood on my mom's car, 2 alligator clips onto the car battery, and run the computer off the car battery. And if I used it for too long, I can remember to this day, the screen would start to kind of warble and go hourglass, and then it would just like poof, like gone, and then I know that I was in trouble because the car battery was like worn out. And so I also learned to jumpstart cars at a very early age.
So 2 quick questions here. Do you have any pictures of this contraption?
I actually really wish I did. I've got a couple pictures of me, my brother playing on it, but I don't have the actual, alligator clip piece. So I know it's out there somewhere on eBay or something, and I'd love to, reconnect with that computer.
Which skill set was more important when you're young? The jump starting the cars, or knowing how to program?
Well, learning how to program has been so fundamental to, where I kind of had a long path of non-technology businesses and ended up back at technology. Love it so much. But I think also just growing up on a farm is a really cool upbringing for kids. You learn a ton of problem solving and how to fix things. Like, you can't just always call the person to come and fix the thing. And so often, you're learning to be the plumber or the electrician, or, well, not in our case, the electrician, but the whatever, the mechanic, and that's a really cool skill set to bring in terms of problem solving.
Okay. Is it still the same? There's no app that you can have on your farm, just call someone up and come get mechanical services?
So interesting story. I read this bit the other day about how tractors from did anybody read this? 90s and early 90s, 80s and 90s are actually really popular with farmers right now because they're worried about getting locked into these fancy tractors that they can't fix themselves. And so there's like real popularity in that vintage, and it's having a resurgence.
Okay, so tell us how you got from farm to starting Invoke. You had to paint, I guess you had the paintball, you had a few others. So what was the steps that got you Invoke?
Yeah, so I did the paintball business, an amazing high school business. I did it a little after high school. I knew I wanted to do business, and I was kind of scratching my head on how to scale it. Like, it was so tied to me as the solopreneur. I actually had a small team, but just so much of it was tied to that. I went to UVic. I studied business. I ate a lot of pizza by the slice, and
not Subways.
I was what? Sorry.
Not Subway sandwiches.
No, not Subway sandwiches, but I was similarly hitting tons of pizza by the slice. And I'd been doing business for a lot of years leading up to that, like 5 years of business. And I kind of was doing the, year 2, year 3, and I was waiting for the big, like, okay, when are we going to really get into the stuff that I haven't done? And I just got impatient. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are practical, experiential learners. And I just decided for me, I was going to drop out and do something ridiculous, which is start a pizza restaurant. So restaurants are the highest failure business on the planet. I went and started this restaurant. I did it for a few years. It was an amazing experience. Pizza by the Slice. I did it back in Vernon, so I could do my paintball business and my pizza business. Did it for 2 years, 98, 99. And while this was going on, I kind of always had computers in the side. I was like making brochures with them. I was doing other stuff with them. But I always had that passion for it. And so here it is, 1999. I'm doing this restaurant, and like .com is happening over here. And I'm like, why am I not doing .com? Because that's really cool. So I sold the restaurant. I moved to Vancouver. I bought a big computer. I holed up for a winter and just learned HTML, CSS, Flash. I built a bit of a portfolio. I got a job at a .com. And then everything .com blew up and exploded. And so there I was, and I was thinking about it. I'm like, well, I've got these skills. I fundamentally believe that the internet is going to be really important, even though it's kind of like having a trough right now. And so I started a services agency. That was Invoke, and started building $500 websites, $1,000 websites, and just building off of every project that we did. I started layering in a hybrid of products with the services. So often we'd have customers that would approach us with problems. We'd solve the problems. We'd build a software for it, and then we'd resell that software, and that ended up being a pretty good hybrid model for us. And that was really, started that in 2000, went with that till 2008, and that was really the advent of Hootsuite. It came out of that agency as a need that we had.
So tell me how it came out of the agency. Was there a demand for social media services? How do you know this was a product to spin out?
So leading up to that, the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours, I started this business in 2000, the agency Invoke, and we'd built up a string of different products. We were probably at about 8 or 10 products at that point. The team that was working within the agency got really good at productization. We got really fast. We built up a ton of kind of off-the-shelf things that we could deploy out. We worked as core developing team, core designing team, project management, all these functions, got all of these reps together in terms of building out different apps. So we got really good at the app side. On the services side, there was a trend that was happening. We had customers that would come to us, and the cool thing about doing that agency is people bring you problems. And so we had customers that were coming to us, and they were asking for us to help get them exposure on social media. So like, hey, can you guys set up a Twitter account? Can you help share some content and some marketing material through it? So we started a little practices group doing that. And then we really quickly realized that there wasn't a tool to help manage this as a team. And so we were opening we'd have like Firefox and IE open in one tab, and that'd be one for each customer, so you're not logged in accidentally as two, and then you'd forget a password, and there were post-it notes for passwords, and then somebody posted something that somebody else was going to post, and so you had double posting, all this stuff, like just really, really basic stuff that we're like, okay, a bit of a light bulb moment, we're going to need a tool to help manage this, and there's probably going to be other people that need the similar tool. And so it was to scratch our own itch on helping our customers. We, again, with having that kind of like 10,000 hours of chops up, we built a prototype, kind of wireframed it and mocked it, launched it 2 months later, and then we could just see the uptick. So we could see, we emailed like 100 of our friends, and they're the first like 100 users on the product, and then you just see like 110, 150, 200, and it, to Sam's point, we found something that had that product fit. One thing that I'd say to every entrepreneur on this is like, you can go and hustle in a slow growth category, or you can find a really big wave. And my advice is just, if you're in a slow growth category like pizza, for example, like, why are you there? Because in a year or 2 years, you can be an absolute expert in this new emerging wave that's going on of social, of internet, of now blockchain, of whatever it is. So get in front of a big emerging wave and go and be an expert in that. And that's kind of what we did with social. We got in front of that. We rode that big wave. The 10 other businesses that we did leading up to that, they're kind of irrelevant today. Like, none of them really caught on that big wave.
So you decided to split out into two. How did you decide who to take with you? Who was the co-founders of Hootsuite? And what did you tell the people that you didn't take along for the ride?
Yeah. Well, about 2005, I met up with a couple really great guys that were, they had their own agency, Dario and David. They were doing similar type of agency work. We had complementary skill sets, and we decided to partner under Invoke. And that was really good. Laura mentioned partnering, find a great partner. It's when you're small, having a partner is really helpful. One, they can work in areas of the business that are complementary to your skill set, like things that you aren't good at or don't like doing. There's, strangely enough, people that like doing stuff that you don't like doing, and if you find them, that's a really good thing. So I found these great partners. We had a good run of building out apps within the agency, and when it got to time with Hootsuite and we saw it taking off, it was a hungry baby. We just in terms of the resources, we started with 3 people from a 21-person team working on it. By the end of the year, or actually about 6 months in, we had 7 people from a 21-person team working on this hungry baby project, 0 revenue, and so the economics aren't good, as you guys know. So we started, kind of like racking up the visa bill for hosting fees, and I just realized we're going to need to go raise some money on this. It was a highly competitive category. We had funded competitors, and so I went fundraising, closed a round, and then we had the conversation amongst the founders. And I said, like, this is a risky one. I feel passionate about it. They decided they stuck around and managed the agency, and I went with this. And in terms of the team, there was a 7-person team working on it. We split those folks out and talked with everybody about who did and didn't want to go, and most people did. A couple didn't, and they stayed. And we co-located for a while, and then we ended up just needing more and more space. And that's how that kind of played out. I'm still on the board of Invoke, and it's a baby, and I love all of the businesses I've been involved with through the years.
Cool. More questions about the start when you split off. So you just mentioned you raised venture. I think it was like $1.5 million or $2 million. So why? Sounds like you needed resources, but what was the rationale behind that? You came from a service business, which is always, I imagine, self-funded, and now you're going to venture. Why?
Well, it's a great question. So first off, we'd been funding this out of the agency profits for a while, and so you start to dig a little bit of a credit hole on that front. I always talk to entrepreneurs on because usually people jump to, I've got this idea, funding, and so talking about the whys getting there. It's a great question. There's a few times when I say makes sense. So first off, you're in a really competitive marketplace with funded up competitors, and if you're not able to compete with that, you're going to get left behind. And usually, it is a winner take all or most world. You pick mobile phones, like Apple has the monster share, and then you've got Android. Uber and Lyft, they're different sizes and scale, different businesses. And so really you want to think about how fast you can go, how fast you can get a big market share, and are there those competitive forces? If there aren't those competitive forces, if you're self-funded and making a good profit, my advice to entrepreneurs often is just to keep doing what you're doing. Don't go for the raise, and just keep building and keep funding yourself.
So took new funding. You went from a service to product business. You're now CEO. What is the role of CEO? I think lots of founders call themselves CEO, but as someone that's now scaled a company, what is the CEO's role?
Well, it evolves over time. Absolutely, as you scale and grow your business, your role completely changes and transforms. From being the CEO of a 7-person team, I was CEO of the agency, whole different skill set, etc. Moving that over to a product company, CEO of a 7-person product company, you have to be the most informed on your product vision. You have to be the person that's talking to your customer. You have to be quarterbacking the team. And that does change over time. A lot of that's still true. As we started to scale, and I mentioned this, most entrepreneurs, most people gravitate towards what they're good at and what they like doing. So you have to think about what type of skill set you're bringing to your business. What's your expertise? Mark Benioff at Salesforce is a sales leader CEO. You have Tim at Apple, who is a CFO, a finance track leader. You've got product visionary leaders like Mark Zuckerberg. And so think about what you are. Elon Musk, he's a product and marketer. So the cool thing, again, is you gravitate towards what you like doing. You find the people that you backfill into the areas that you don't love. I've got a great VP of Finance, SVP of Finance. He loves finance. He sits in spreadsheets every day. And if I had to do that, I wouldn't be my happiest self, and I wouldn't be the best leader I could be. So, that is something that as you grow changes. And then I would also say that the amount of communications as you grow somewhere between a 10-person company and a 1,000-person company, there's, I think, a direct correlation to how much communication you do. In the beginning, I thought it was going to be very little, and today it is primarily what I do is communicate to people within the company to keep them aligned and heading towards the direction we need to go.
So You said CEOs depend on what they do depends on their strength. What's your super strength?
Well, I think I'm good at product, I'm good at marketing, and I'm good at culture. From my agency background, I knew you were going to ask this, so those are. Well, I kind of sat there. I thought I would always say like I'm a good product person, but I asked my team today, a couple folks, and I was like, so what do you? I'm just curious what you guys would say. They said creativity, and I think that's an interesting thing. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, and I wouldn't disagree with them, I think a lot of entrepreneurs are creative people. They love finding a problem, and they love solving it, and there's a real creativity in doing that. There's a real creativity in building a business, and that's why so many of us do what we do. We love the idea of building something that didn't exist before and making it big and making it happen. So I think creativity is probably a big part of it. And again, from the agency world and the communications that I do, making complex things simple is something that I think I'm fairly good at, but I think something that all entrepreneurs should aspire to do, because I see this so often in pitch decks. And I do some mentoring and work with my charity LOI. The art of a pitch is to get something down to just the bare essence, the simplest thing you can get it down to that makes sense. Because when you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking about your business day and night, you're like playing 3D chess. You're like so deep into it, and you get every angle, and you know the competitors are, and blah, 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 blah. But when you go to pitch somebody in like 15 minutes or a half hour, an hour, they can't get up to speed with you quick enough. And so you have to give them just the tops of the mountains on what you're doing. And so that's a really challenging thing to do, getting simplicity in whether it's a pitch deck or any type of presentation. Something that I think editorial is really helpful for, something I didn't do at early stage, and something that I really try to get more of now.
So creativity and communications is your strength. What's your kryptonite?
Communications and creativity. I'd probably say, when you get to a bigger company, there's a real ripple effect on, so you can have these great ideas, and you realize that people want to make you happy, and they want to make these things come to life, but you can send a real ripple effect through an organization that goes downhill. So I talked to my VP marketing about this great idea, and then he goes and talks to some directors, and then all of a sudden the machine's going, and people are doing this, and what was I was kind of like bouncing off this idea, maybe not with enough clarity, and all of a sudden I've got like 50 people working on it day and night, and it's like, oh man, that was just kind of wanted to just napkin sketch that, not get to this. And so understanding the ripple effect of that is something that I had to learn over time. I think working with teams is something that I'm constantly, hopefully getting better at, and something, that as leaders is real challenging thing for a lot of people to just understand that. And as your company scales, it can be a really interesting journey to see how you evolve along with that.
So you've mentioned scaling and how roles and different items of a company change over time as you scale. So let's pick apart a few of those things. One is, how's the culture and recruiting in the team changed over time and as you scaled?
Well, I have to say that when you're a smaller organization, I did initial interviews, like first interviews with the first probably 60 people that came into Hootsuite. First, second interviews, like that, and there's a lot of time in doing that. I said I never wanted to work at a company that has an HR leader, and that joking, I don't know, I just thought it would be fun to be small and nimble and all of that. When I got to about 60, I realized this wasn't scalable, and I needed to bring in that person. And luckily, I had that person. They joined as they actually wanted to be the HR person, but they joined as an office manager and an EA. I worked with her. Her name is Ambrosia. I worked with her really closely for a number of years. Actually, sorry, it's more like a number. number of months, I think, but worked really closely with her. She got to really understand the culture of the business, and was the gatekeeper as I started to get an HR function, the gatekeeper to making sure that people that came into the business were people that were going to work in the business. So when you're doing it as an entrepreneur, you really can meet people and understand them. That's fantastic. But the second that you start to outsource that brings in a lot of risk, and you're basically losing control of that function. So the person that is there controlling the gates, you have to be so lockstep with them. And I see like some of you guys nodding because I think you know how important that first person is that's doing that. Another key point on that HR function, as soon as you do put it in, make sure you really, really get that person. You know them front and back. They know you. They know what is important for your culture, where you want to go with the business, and should really be one of your key stakeholders, because if that's not working well, there's big repercussions. Things start to build in the wrong way, and then you have a big problem that you got to undo.
So how's the culture changed from 10 years ago to today? And is it the right one to succeed?
Yeah, culture is constantly evolving. Our culture 6 years ago, or not even 4 years ago, the build up from 30 to 80 to 200 to 500 people, that ramp year over year is a really significant ramp. Having the right people come in the door, really important. But also if you step back a couple of years, like we've undergone as an industry, a real transformative change over the past couple of years with Me Too, with tech bro culture, with on. People are really reassessing like what a technology business is. Thinking about what diversity and inclusion, Sam talked about this earlier, looks like in their business at an earlier stage. And so what was very status quo 5 years ago is not acceptable in today's work environment in a lot of ways. Like foosball tables, kind of borderline. It's still accepted, but a lot of people are like, it's kind of bro culture-ish, And so we think about, what is the balance? What's the environment balance? What does diversity look like at the business? What is the culture that we're setting through the things that we do, events that we do, people that we bring into the business? Are they mapping with where we want to go and where we see the future of the workforce? Our culture is constantly evolving, and as I think most work cultures are.
Interesting. I want to ask something. There's two things I think that's very unique about your company, Vancouver. One is you've done lots of acquisitions. I think you've done over 10 acquisitions. Why have you done so many acquisitions? How does that impact culture? How do you bring all those people in?
Yeah, so we've done, you're right, about 10. They've been at varying scale. So we've done, we think about three things from an acquisition: talent, traction, and technology. And it's usually going to check one or all of those boxes. Sometimes it's just like a little piece of interesting technology we make an acquisition of and pull that into our stack. Sometimes we really like the traction. They've got a good user base. We'll pull it in. Or the talent is some group that we really want to bring into the company. So we've done varying degrees of M&A. We've done some that are more traction, soft landing. So, we acquired a few Twitter clients that were kind of folding up. They had some customer traction. We incorporated them in and we did it on success. So that didn't affect culture that much. The ones that primarily affect culture are when you're bringing in a whole bunch of talent. And so we've brought talent in from an acquisition we did in Romania called Uberview, which was the foundation of some of our listening and analytics products. We did an acquisition of a company called Adespresso, which is in Italy. And for the most part, look, it's challenging to incorporate them in. We have achieved a big enough core scale of our employee base that, percentage-wise, bringing in 40 people into a 1,000-person organization, the culture's pretty established. We try to get them onboarded to our culture and also look at what the cool things that they're doing and try to honor those. We'll often run them in parallel as like standalone P&Ls But ultimately, there is a plan over time that they really pull into the company and become part of the company. And the cool thing about having a great employer brand out there is that when you go and talk with people, usually they're super excited about your mission or joining your organization and your culture, and that makes things a lot easier. When you don't have an exciting employer brand and you go sniffing around, people are kind of like ducking, or they're like talking about how they want to do a 3-month earn out so that they can get the hell out, or whatever else. So I think it's really important that's a really good investment in making sure that your employer brand is impeccable.
Let's jump from M&A and culture to your competitive landscape. I think, like you said, you went after a fast-growing area, social. In the last 12 years, it seems like everything about social has changed. So how have you remained relevant, and what's the biggest challenge with that?
Yeah, it's a constantly evolving space, which is fantastic, and also keeps us up at night. I mean, the thing that honestly, the keep me up at night question used to be, we're built on top of Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. What happens if Twitter wakes up one day and says, we don't like these Hootsuite guys, and turns off the tap? That would really undermine our value prop. And so we invested from an early stage in our corp dev partnerships and our relationships with all of our alliance partners to make sure that we had good relationships with them. Over the past couple of years, we've seen Cambridge Analytica and other challenges that have happened with the social networks, and so they're weighing this up, and they look at the risk of us versus what we provide to their customers and some of their most important customers. And so we provide tools that help make using Facebook and others more easy. And so what's happened now with Cambridge Analytica is that they've assessed the partners in their landscape. They've said they want good actors in their partner ecosystem, and people that aren't good actors get the boot. And so what it's actually done is decrease the number of preferred partners in their ecosystem. But more importantly, and this is, I think, something that's now become a strategic benefit, is that they want a smaller, tighter group of preferred partners. And we're one of those, thankfully, those partners, and that's been through years of partnership, being a good actor, not doing nefarious stuff, not doing scraping of Facebook and other things that would have got us blacklisted and kicked out. So you have to be long term in your thinking and supportive of your partners, and I think that pays off at the end of the day.
Cool. I could ask you 100 more questions about Hootsuite. I'm going to ask you a couple about the ecosystem, and open up the Q&A for the audience. So everyone thinks companies just go straight up and to the right. It's never true, and I think in the last couple of years you had a few layoffs and a bit of bad press. How have you dealt with that, and how do you maintain a good culture and keep that good employer brand throughout what looks like difficult times from outside?
Yeah. So, it's a real challenging thing when you have to do a round of layoffs or reorganization. Net, it's happened twice. The first time we had a candid look at, we've been scaling, as I said, like 30, 80, 200, 500 over, 4 years. You're not going to ace it in terms of hires on every single person. You're also going to have to do a reassessment at certain points on, like, are the people that were with you 5 years ago the people that are going to be with you in 5 years? Some people are absolutely amazing startup people. They love being a Swiss Army knife. They're generalists. They're not specialists. As you get bigger, you more frequently look for specialists and have multiple specialists. And people that are less comfortable with ambiguity come in at a later stage. Here's the defined role. Here's what you're doing. People early stage, they're like, okay, just let me jump out of the airplane in the middle of the darkness, and they're happy with that. And so that changes, that profile changes, and you really have to. Some people want to go on that journey and want to go to the next stage, and some people are like, get me out of here. And so, first round of reorganization, that was kind of the color of it. The second round of reorganization we did, it was about allocation of resources, where we'd made investments. And as an executive, we needed to make decisions on investing in our product team, and we had other areas where we didn't need to be investing in, and we made changes around that. Very challenging, as a leader, it's the hardest decision you make is around that, because it just really sucks. People get affected by it, and but if you do it with kindness, compassion, open and transparent communication, I think it lessens it, and I can sleep a little bit better knowing that every one of those people is highly employable, and they landed on their feet in really good order and moved ahead.
So let's now move from Hootsuite to the ecosystem, and I think the last thing you said there is actually quite important. So I think a few years ago, someone asked you why build a company in Vancouver, and you said no one's hiring here. You got lots of great talent. Having a great brand. It's pretty easy to hire today. I think Shopify just made an announcement they're going to be hiring people. Amazon is hiring 1,000 people here. Brex is here. So you have not only local companies, but lots of foreign companies, or be it from Ottawa or be it from south of the border, coming here. So how does that change competitive dynamics? How does that change the ecosystem? And why should someone here work for a local company versus someone that's really well funded from outside of Vancouver?
Yeah, look, people can be patriotic and decide to work for a Canadian company, but I think at the end of the day, there's things that they're looking at. They're looking at the culture of the company, and they're looking at the compensation, right? And that's the big kind of balance and criteria that people weigh up. I think that we are in a highly competitive environment. I mean, I welcome those brands coming here. I think that ultimately it results in a more healthy ecosystem than just having a single, headquartered business here. I'm really excited about seeing them come here because I know the spin-off of that altruistically for startups in this city, I think is important. You get people that go do a tour of duty at Amazon, at Hootsuite, at Shopify, at Brex, wherever. They're going to be learning really great skills. They may not want to work there forever, and then they go out and maybe do their startup or maybe join a startup. That, to me, is like an exciting legacy out of what we're doing. And so, yes, the marketplace might get competitive, but the good news is that as salaries drive up, et cetera, more people come in and funnel in. They decide, maybe this is the direction of the future that they want to get into. So whether it's, taking classes at OUC or UVic or Waterloo or wherever it is, my belief is that as the marketplace heats up, we will have more people supply into it. I believe that we can have an amazing technology, culture in Canada, and we're already seeing like a lot of decentralization of the valley, and great businesses can be started anywhere, and so it really should be here.
Cool. You've launched the next big thing in LOI, so you seem to be a big supporter of the ecosystem. What are you trying to accomplish with these programs, and what can anyone here do to help build the ecosystem?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking about that. So League of Innovators is LOI, and it's my charity. The goal of it is to find and accelerate young entrepreneurs. So you guys heard my story. I started my first business when I was 16, a paintball company, 35 Hootsuite, so call it 20 years. My goal is to help entrepreneurs find their Hootsuite in less than 20 years because it's a long haul. And so we solicit for applications we do twice, I think two entries per year. We've had some amazing young entrepreneurs come out of the program, millions of dollars raised, big impact. And I'm just a believer that if we could have 10 Hootsuites in Vancouver, when you look at the economic impact of that, the prosperity it creates, the alumni that come out of it, that is the type of thing that really gets and kickstarts an ecosystem. And we just need more of that. And so that's, selfishly and altruistically, my goal is to just try to help get more of these businesses going and accelerating. We've got, as I say, the entrepreneurs are between 17 and 25 years old. Some of you fall within that, but those of you that don't, that have got like war stories, etc. We love people that come out and talk and share their war stories with these young entrepreneurs. And so, feel free to hit us up on that.
Cool. Thank you very much. Let's go to questions now. Can you go to the next slide, actually? Okay, we're going to try doing something different. If you go to Slido, do we have the, put in V159, you can put your question up there, and everyone can upvote or downvote the questions, and they'll come on my mobile. So while everyone pulls out their mobile and starts putting questions in, I'll take one from the audience.
Hey, Ryan. Awesome. So one of the learnings that you mentioned as you were growing as a CEO was that ripple effect, like something that you're just saying, hey, just kicking things around, but it had a ripple effect and your entire organization before you know it was working on it. What were some of the other learnings, and is there any other way a CEO can learn about sort of these mistakes, except for like reading books, attending events? Was there any consistent way you were able to learn as you were scaling from like 50 to 100 to 200, or were they all like learning by doing it?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned books, obviously. You know, Ben Horowitz, The Hard Thing About Hard Things is like seminal. It's one of the books that I wish, like, I kind of got it. I'm like, oh yeah, that, cool, yeah, no, that, got that. It like flipped through, but like every single one of the things I wish I had known before I learned the hard lesson. So I'd really recommend that to people. You know, I'm an experiential learner, as I mentioned, so I, you know, go out and do the things and then try to learn from it, try to make smaller tests so that I'm not creating a big, expensive, painful learning. So maybe learn from, you know, smaller tests and samples. But I think it is just that. Like somebody said something about learning being, or leading being learning, like out in the open, and everybody kind of watching you learn. And it's it can be a very exposed feeling at times, but you know, something you just have to get thick skin around and be comfortable with and adapt and evolve. And you know, people see that and can give you support from that.
Thank you. And were you always like open to vulnerability as a leader as you were scaling this organization, or did you let that out, or you kept a thick skin and say, hey, I got this all?
Yeah, you know, I think I've got strong opinions that are loosely held. And so I can be swayed if people present a good argument, and I encourage that. I encourage people to say like, hey, that idea sucks, or, you know, why are you doing it this way? Like, that's great, because you can't learn in a bubble. So when, you know, I'm approaching something, I love to get that feedback from people. I do have strong opinions on it, but let's change those opinions. And so I did, you know, I mentioned like, I never want to work at a business that has an HR department. Like, silly opinion, right? I just had this idea that I'd always like to keep it small and whatever, but as we started getting bigger, I'm like, this is exciting. Let's get more people and let's keep growing this. Like, we need to support people. We need to have people over here. And all of a sudden you realize, okay, well that isn't going to work. And so what's the next thing? Communications, as I mentioned, becomes so important. I initially, you know, kind of rolled my eyes a little bit at mission, vision, values, process, and building out our company. It sounded like kind of fluffy HR stuff to me, but it has huge value when you start to get a big group of people together and try to get them aligned. And my HR person asked me for this. They're like, hey, here's why it's important for me. When I go to talk to people, they're asking me about what our values are as a business, and until we get them down on paper, I'm just going to be making it up. And so would you rather get them down on paper, or would you rather me to make it up? And by the way, I'm hiring somebody else and they're going to make up something different. And so, okay, well, that makes sense, right? And so, you know, we started with that practice. There's countless times where I've changed my opinion on things, and just it's needed to evolve.
Okay, Ryan, we're going to try to do something hard here. We've got lots of questions submitted. I'll read a top question. Let's try to like rapid fire. Okay. I think you said...
I'm terrible at rapid fire, by the way.
Okay, I think hopefully the first one's relatively easy, because you talked about getting ahead of the next big wave. Yeah. So by far the most popular question is, what do you see as the next big wave in the tech or related landscape?
Oh, yeah, I mean, what a cool time we all live in right now. There are just so many interesting things going on out there. The food industry is, you know, look at what's going on with Beyond and Impossible. You know, so I've recently gone veggie vegan, kind of exploring that for a little while. I think that whole industry is transforming. I look at, you know, blockchain, I still think is interesting. There's going to be applications that come out of that. Transportation completely getting thrown on its head. there's lots of categories. Just get reading on any one of them, and it's hard to like think about where your place in that is. Like we're not all going to start a rocket company, right? But there's definitely a place that we can play in that. Just break it down and try to follow it, and you can get into something like that. It's just you got to have passion on it. You got to learn it really well.
I'll take a follow-up question that's very similar to that. You said you have to read and learn what's going on. So one question was, what do you read, listen, and watch to learn?
Okay. Yeah. So I have what I call my book pile of shame, which is these books. I've been really grateful that people have gifted me books, and so look, we all need to be doing more reading, and we all feel guilty about it, I think. I mentioned Ben Horowitz. I'm reading his most recent book right now, which is around culture. Podcasts. I really have been liking this one recently called Math and Magic. It's iHeartRadio podcast. It's about marketing. They've got incredible speakers that join on that. Anybody listening to that one? Anybody? No Math and Magic people out there. Take a listen. It's really great. I have a number of news feeds set up. I get a little bit out of social, but I find social news feeds aren't so good anymore for news. So I do a little bit of LinkedIn, and I got a Google Reader, and I got The Information and Hustle are all pretty good sources. Axios for more political stuff, and some startup finance stuff.
So I'm a bit conscious of time, so I'm going to do 2 more questions, and then maybe I'll send this over to your team later, because I have a lot of questions here that maybe we could just do some social after.
Yeah, we can probably hit out some tweets on them.
Yeah, so this next one you knew would probably come. There's lots of rumors of an IPO for Hootsuite. What's the exit plan now for the company?
Yeah.
I'm sure you never
So
heard that
look,
before.
it's a great question I get asked a lot. We benchmark against IPO. We eye it up. We recently had a competitor that went public. So in terms of our benchmarking, we're at north of $200 million in ARR annually. We mentioned some of the Fortune customers, over 20 million users. So these are all great numbers. Our competitor that went public, they're doing about half of our ARR. They came out at like a $9 billion market cap, so it looks great. We are cash flow positive, so we reserve the right to go public when we want to. It's something I also would encourage you guys to think about, like, as you're raising money, if you get money in, like, just I'm a big fan of just building a good old-fashioned business. Like, use that, treat it like it's your last money. Unless you have these really competitive forces that you have to outspend your competitors to be number one. If you don't see that, like, get to profitability, make a profitable business, because that really helps you set and dictate what you want to do, your direction of future with your business. So we're being thoughtful on what our business looks like. Ultimately, the great thing about going public is it creates liquidity for people that own your stock, and so we're eyeing that up and just continue to build a business that is public ready. And I know maybe some of you heard about my announcement. I'm looking for a successor candidate. I've been 11 years in the seat right now. It's full on all the time. I've got a new baby girl, and I want to take a bit of a sabbatical, so I'm going to find a successor. And when it comes to IPO, I'll be working with them as an exec chair, but they'll likely be the person in the seat at that point, somewhere down the road.
Okay. For the last question, I'll let you look at the first top 2 and choose which one, because.
Oh, okay, top 2 and choose one of the 2. All right. Well, okay. I'll talk about the brand, because I love branding. So the OWL brand, one thing I also think CEOs need to be great at is either really good at branding or know somebody that's good at branding and trust them and let them kind of do it. But I think it's so important when you look at the scale of a business and how far it can go. Having good branding is really important early on. And often when you see decks that don't have it, pitch decks, et cetera, that just have terrible branding. It's like you got to invest a little bit in that design and making sure that it looks tight. You can go on Fiverr even and get something together. But we, at the time of Hootsuite, Twitter was a bird, of course. There was a competitor called TweetDeck, which had another bird. There was a competitor called Seismic, which had a raccoon. And I think there was another couple of the bird ones. So it was just a trend at the time. We actually didn't start under the name Hootsuite. We started under a different name, but we chose an owl mascot because owls are the smartest and the far-seeing and all of that. So we went with an owl. And then we had somebody reach out. So the original name for Hootsuite was called Bright Kit, and a collection of like a tool lunch kit or something like that. We had this kit of tools. There's another company called Bright Kite, and they dropped us an email and they're like, "Hey, you're Bright Kit, we're Bright Kite. It's going to get kind of confusing." So we went to our users and we asked them for suggestions on names. We started a contest. It was a $500 bounty, and somebody came up with Hootsuite, and we already had the owl. It's like, this is perfect. And they registered the domain, and I thought, oh, great, here you go. They got the perfect name. And they're going to want 10 grand. But no, the guy was just like, hey, it's such a great name. I just wanted to save it for you guys. He like emailed me the credentials, and I said it was a contest. And so I it was $500 bounty, and I'm like, okay, well, where should I send the $500 check to? Thank you so much. And he's like, just send it to this charity. And I said, great. So anyways, he doesn't know this, but I have put aside like $500 in founder shares, and when we have some event, I'll send him a big check for his contribution.
Excellent. Thank you for that answer. Thank you for coming. Can we get a standing ovation for Ryan?